Welcome back to the Takeout. Thanks for hanging out with us. Russia and Ukraine held their first peace talks in nearly 2 months in Istanbul today. Expectations are low, we should say, as Russia continues to pound Ukraine with missiles and armed drones. Previous talks between the two nations did lead to the exchange of prisoners and war dead. President Trump has promised new economic sanctions against Russia if ceasefire talks falter in the coming weeks. Former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor, joins me now. Mr. Ambassador, always great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us.
Major, thanks for having me.
In a way, it seems to me the story of this war is both static and dynamic. Static in the sense the war continues, the pounding of Ukraine unrelenting. Dynamic in the sense there may be new calculations afoot.
Major, it's also static in terms of the Russians on the ground. You know, we hear a lot about, oh, the Russians are pushing forward, pushing forward. It turns out they are pushing forward, but little, very little by little, at great expense. So that's kind of the static part as well. They're not pushing. They're not about to break through. But you're also right that there's some change in this city. We see some new policies over the past week, really, week and a half, that says that President Trump has figured out that President Putin is the problem for one of Trump's main foreign policy initiatives.
And that realization is leading to weapons flows. Yes, they will come through the offices of checks written by European nations, flow through NATO. There's a transactional component to that. But what the Ukrainians care about is weapons and fresh resupplies. And that looks like it's coming.
It does look like it's coming, and that's what we should care about, too. We should care about the Ukrainians get the weapons they need to stop the Russians, indeed, to push them back. That's the important thing. And you're right. There's a new mechanism whereby the Europeans buy them. Actually, the Europeans send from their own stocks, their own inventories, into Ukraine right now. So they don't have to wait. And then the Europeans turn around, ask the Americans, buy from the Americans the replacements. So that gets these weapons into the Ukrainians soon, which they need right now, in particular these air defense ones.
Because the drones from Russia are multiplying. It used to be 200 to 300. Now it's sometimes 400 to 500.
600, 700, 800 a night. A night. Yeah.
And so that is not only the physical risk, it's the psychic trauma of this unrelenting warfare visited upon Ukrainians nationwide.
Sleep deprivation is part of exactly that. It's part of that psychological warfare.
So there's also talk from the president himself and his administration about sanctions. There's this timeline that goes into September. Should we take that timeline seriously? Do you think, more importantly, Vladimir Putin takes that timeline seriously?
Everyone has seen timelines come and go in this administration. That said, there is some pressure for the beginning of September for the Chinese and the Indians, who would be the targets of some of these real sanctions. So the Chinese...
Because they would deal with energy supplies,
they're buying
which they're
Russian
the big
oil.
Purchasers of.
They're buying, exactly. They're buying Russian oil, and that's what the target is. The
target's not so much Moscow, it's India and China.
It's to reduce revenues going into the Russian economy. Mm-hmm. And if they don't buy oil, then... So the Chinese and the Indians may say, look, we don't want to be hit by these sanctions, so we're going to put some pressure on Putin to come to the table and negotiate. That's, again, the pressure needs to be on Putin, who is the problem.
And that has never materialized, China or India doing anything, even though China talks a very big game about sovereignty and internal controls and things like that. Not a word, not a discouraging word from China about the Russia invasion.
Not a discouraging word about the Russian invasion. They did actually have one discouraging word for Putin, and that is, knock off this talk about nuclear weapons. And they did, Right. Chinese really doesn't want that.
But that's an indicator of a potential lever that has yet to be used against Russia that might bring this to a different resolution.
Which is the goal of these sanctions. And as you know, Senator Graham and Senator Blumenthal have 85 co-sponsors. Where do you get that kind of support, anti-Russia, pro-Ukraine, to be able to really seriously threaten them with these kind of sanctions?
And all they're waiting for, Mr. Ambassador, is a green light from the Trump White House. Both the House and the Senate have said that. We're ready to go. We have it written. You just need to tell us. And they're waiting for that. Perhaps that worm will turn.
Perhaps that worm will turn. Maybe he will. It certainly is good for President Trump to have that in his pocket. he can demonstrate to Putin that the Americans are with him. American politics, American people are with him in terms of supporting Ukraine and opposing Russia.
Ambassador Taylor, thanks so much for coming in. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks for having me.